Thank you very much for the introduction. When I've been asking to do this presentation, people said, oh, this is really opportunity for you to shine yourself, to highlight your career and highlight your research. But that is not the reason I'm here. I don't want to highlight myself. I don't want to shine my research. The reason why I'm here is because I think remanufacturing is a really important aspect of the circular economy, but I feel there isn't enough understanding, awareness of this one. That is why I wanted to come here. I want to talk about this. I want people to understand. And there are a lot of opportunities there, but there are some challenges. So for this presentation, what I want to talk about is not about my research, but I want to show the big picture of remanufacturing. I will talk about some introduction, then the challenge, then we'll talk about the futures of this remanufacturing. I think we all know environmental crisis is the single grand challenge humanity is facing. You have already bombarded with information about the environmental crisis. I don't want to talk about any more about that. I think you already have enough information. What I'm trying to say here is governments in the UK and in the global, in the EU and other countries have already developed a strategy to address the environmental problem we're facing. And the UK government has already committed legally to achieve net zero 2050, and that is the legal commitment. This cannot be achieved without a circular economy. So when you talk about net zero, a lot of people think of it's about renewable energies, it's really about energy efficiency, but it's not only the full picture, and the circular economy is the other half of the pictures we need to look at. So when you talk about circular economy, you need to look at what is the opposite of the circular economy, and that is linear economy. Linear economy is about materials extraction, production, they use, and then throw away. Each stage, there are enormous environmental impacts. You talk about the resource, you talk about the water, you talk about energy. Each of them create a lot of environmental impact. Just give a simple examples. To make laptops, I'm only talking about water. You're talking about 13,000 liters of water just for the manufacturing production stage. Not to mention about the energy you can use, not talking about the waste, not talking about the material extraction. You only talk about the production. All of these efforts, when you finish their life, they just been thrown away, go to the landfill. That is massive waste of energy, waste of resource. We cannot keep doing things like that. Throw it away. It's not. I mean, nature doesn't have such a system as a waste. In the nature, you always have something. Waste of something is always the resource of something else, but not in our system here. Therefore, I think a circular economy is trying to address the issue. Circular economy is trying to keep product and the materials in circulation as long as possible. So circular economy in a different formats. One is about recycling. Recycling is you reintegrate the materials back to the material extraction, but you still have to go through the production stage and still don't solve the problem. You only solve a bit of the problem, but not all the problem. There are better format of the circular economy, which is a value retention process, which covers remanufacturing, refurbishment, reuse, and repair. So what exactly is remanufacturing? Remanufacturing, by definition, in the BSI 8887, for the committee what I'm chairing, they gave the definition is remanufacturing is as good as new. So you take end-of-life product, you go through disassembly, cleaning, inspection. If they're good enough, we reuse them. If they're repairable, we repair them. If not repairable, we replace the parts. But in generally speaking, you would expect the majority of the parts, they are reusable. Then you reassemble them, then you test them, then return back to use again. So when you talk about as good as new, you expect first is as good as new process management. You also talk about as good as new performance, as well as good as new warranty. Without any of them, you cannot classify a product as remanufactured product. So remanufactured product is as good as new, but probably not always the best way of doing that, because sometimes it's just too expensive to do the remanufacturing. There are other forms of value retention process. You can talk about repair. Repair is, for example, if your laptop or if your mobile phone is broken, you take it to the repair shop, get it repaired, restore the function. So you don't change other part, you just restore the function. Refurbishment is similar to remanufacturing, but they don't guarantee, in generally speaking, they are not as good as new. They don't claim to be as good as new. Then you talk about reuse. Reuse is kind of you either, for example, you want to get rid of your mobile phone, but you sell them on eBay, somebody else to reuse it. Or it's the component of one part, you reuse it, you mix some component of another part, and then they become refurbished product. So there are different formats of the value retention process. There is no saying one is better than the other one. It's just different way to, different quality and a different format. So if you're looking at the value retention process, if you want to compare to new, in terms of performance, in terms of warranty, remanufacturing is the only format of the value retention process that can be compared with new. If you want to like, remanufacture is the only one, the only format you can compare with new. There, in terms of performance, remanufactured product is far more better than refurbished, reused, and repaired. But if you look at the value, because there are a lot of effort, the money, the resource, the water, the energy, everything goes in the first life, and you want to keep them as much as possible because we want to keep materials, product in circulation as much as possible. Then the remanufactured VRPs, they're the best, much better option compared to recycling, because recycling probably only keep the 5 to 10% of value. But the remanufacturing VRPs, you're talking about minimum 50% to 99% of the value has been captured and keep them in circulation, in use, rather than go to the scrapyard. Recycling is not the best option, but compared to producing new product from virgin materials, then recycling is still better. It's just, I want to give the message is, when we talk about circular economy, recycling is useful. Eventually, all the product will go to recycling, but there are other forms of circular economy we need to understand, and they need to be looked at before we go to the recycling. So when we talk about circular economy, where we are in the circular economy, we are not, to be honest, we're still effectively a single economy, linear economy. Because if you look at clothing, 1% is just being recycled. And food, a lot of them are wasted. Toys, majority goes spent at the landfill. Mobile phones, majority will just go to scrapyard. Electronics, every second we are talking about 800 laptops just being thrown away. Hospitals, I have my colleague from the Brighton Sussex Medical School. He can tell you everything about that. 90% of medical devices are single-use. There are massive environmental issues because we are effectively linear economy. were really, really bad. So if you talk about on average, we're about 8.6% circular, and even worse compared to 2 years ago. We're not improving, we're getting worse. This is measured material recirculation, which means recycling, not VRPs. If you talk about VRPs, it's even less. So we're not really there yet in terms of circular economy. So why am I talking about remanufacturing, value retention process? I think we all have issues with rising cost. Whether our students, as well our students sitting now, whether or not you're students or you're business, we all have rising costs, enormous financial pressure. But have you ever think of, if you look at buying a remanufactured mobile phone or laptops, or remanufactured product could offer some cheaper options, but you can still keep the same functions. Government has implemented ban of internal combustion engines and cars by 2035. But if you look at the cars currently, still 85% of the cars are still internal combustion engine. We still produce more and more internal combustion engines. What happens to them after a few years' time? They all go to scrapyard because they cannot be reused. We might have to look at a way to convert them from internal combustion engine to electric and to the cleaner fuels. Otherwise, they become much, much more severe problem for us. A lot of organizations now under enormous pressure for the carbon accounting, either because the end user ask them to do that, they have to provide it by the end user, by the clients, or because they're required by the government, they must declare the carbon emissions of the operations of the products. Then remanufactured products, you offer about 60 to 90% of emission saving. This is a massive saving for the company, for them to develop or to demonstrate they are, they're doing something for the environment. Public sectors have another typical example because city councils are under enormous pressure, financial pressure, and enormous pressure for net zero. And the remanufactured product not an option for them because if you have exactly the same performance, you save 80% emissions, you save 40% of cost. That's no-brainers, right? Do everything exactly the same, but you don't click all the boxes for sustainability. Why not? Give you some examples. This is our committee members for the BSI standards. First is the circular computing. This is an organization, they do remanufacturing of laptops. The quality is doing exactly the same as new. They check the quality the same as new. They have got the first world BSI kite mark, which is based on our BSI standard 887. So they got the first kite mark to prove as good as new, and they have the same warranty as new and the same standard as new. They offer 40% cheaper than new, and this sustainability-wise, they save the avoidance of the waters and the earth's resource just saved per laptops. They currently got 30 million pounds from the government and to provide 60,000 remanufactured laptops. It's getting bigger and bigger business for them. 19, again, is another members of our committees. So lighting is another examples. They are, again, this one they have got the BS 887 kite mark approval, and then they also provide the CE mark. CE mark is the declaration of the business to provide compliance with the legislation, health and safety. So when they remanufacture, to do the remanufacture, that's lightings, they are also be treated as a manufacturer, so they are responsible to the qualities. So they are responsible, they needed to get the CE mark for the product. Again, cost benefit is between 30 to 30% cheaper, And they have increased energy efficiency, and they use a 70% reused materials, 50% carbon reduction, and they prevented 60 tons of carbon. And volume-wise, they're on the target to divert 20,000 units from the waste. This one came from the auto lecture, and the chairman is here. He came from Leeds, just come here to support me. Thank you very much. They're one of the biggest remanufacturers in autolater and starters in the UK. And they have the same quality management specification, like ISO standard for the remanufactured product. Each of the product, they give 2 years warranties, the same as new. The cost is 40 to 50% cheaper. And they all talk about 80% emissions, 79 energy saving, and 91% of materials, saving compared to new one. And then they're only celebrating the 1 million autolaters, to be remanufactured in the UK. That is a massive impact. Then another one is furnitures. I visited this company a few years ago, I think with Cormac. We visited them, and I saw the office. They looked like new. I said, "Is that new?" And they said, "No, it's remanufactured." I said, "Oh, wow, I cannot believe that." So I went to the website. I bought a few chairs at home, one for me, one for my daughter, one for my partner. We all loved it, and it works really good and really much, much cheaper than you buy a new one. And this is one of a few remanufactured you allow you to sell to the consumer. Then the next one is medical devices. Again, a lot of the medical devices, is the single-use one, but however, a lot of the medical devices, they're classified as single-use one. But in reality, the materials, everything, they can remanufacturable. So they could be remanufactured to 5 to 7 times before they go to the scrapyard. So the reason why the manufacturer don't want them to do it, which I will explain later, is because they just not best to the economic benefit, the business benefit for them. So when they've been remanufactured by a third party, the third party is treated as a manufacturer, then by the legislation, by law, they will have to re-certify the product to be compliant with the legislations. Again, this is from my own study. Environmental impact is 50%. The reason why it's only 50% is because they are being single-use. They are not designed to be reused. So when they're doing the reprocessing, 50% of them has to be thrown away because they're not being designed to be remanufactured by a third party. If they have been redesigned in a way for the easy to disassemble, easy to use, you would expect a much higher percentage of emission saving from this process. Again, this is the one we visited. It's a Chinese manufacturer, OEM. They produce in 270,000 pieces. The forklift, we visited the company. They're currently doing kind of mass produce of remanufactured electrified. When I visited them, they are currently already electrified 500 of the internal combustion engine converted to the electrical. And then they are looking for 10,000 used, to re-electrify, remanufacture 10,000 internal combustion engine forklift. And this is already being marketed, has already been sold in the UK it's marketed by the Electrofit Industrial Solutions, which is a good contact for me. So there seems to be really good examples now, but why it's not there yet? Because if you look at the numbers, the ratio of remanufacturing to manufacturing is only 1.9. That is really small percentage. That is only talking about the high-value manufacturing, high-value sectors. You talk about aerospace, automotive, off-road, IT support, rolling stock. This is really big value sectors. Not to mention about other sectors that are sort of much lower value, like textile. So it's only 1.9%. Why? Because to me, the reason for that one is the system, the ecosystem is not there yet, because the ecosystem still built on the linear economy. We need change. So let's have a look at the ecosystem. The ecosystem here first is producer. Producer is ideally, they are the best person to do the remanufacturing because they designed the product, they know everything about the product, they know the materials, they know how it's being manufactured, they have all the information now. But they're the last person who wants to do it. Why? Simply because it's not the best, the business benefit. It's not for them to generate the revenue because they're profit-driven. They want to make more profit to sell new product rather than doing the remanufacturing. So what do? Instead of to support remanufacturing, they block people for doing the remanufacturing. So how many of you have experience when Apple's release any new phones, a new version of laptops, new version of a tablet, and then you realize your older version become very slow? How many of you have that experience? I'm sure you're loading your, oh, thank you very much. So they are deliberately trying to block you from using it. And how many of you have Windows 11 upgrade? Thank you very much. I have to scrap my functional Office desktop just because incompatible with Windows 11. Perfectly functional, and then they have to, the IT told me they have to go to scrapyard because it's not very useful. At home, we have to scrap my partner have a lot of issues with our existing computer because we have to scrap our existing, again, perfect functional. And even worse is when we started looking at the components for the computer, a few weeks ago, they're bought much cheaper. And then when I did realize we have to replace it, it's 10%, 15% higher, more expensive, because everybody else is doing the same. They want to replace the computers. And why? How could I realize I'm not the only one has the problem. I just did some quick search. When you look globally, you talk about 240 million computers go to the landfill. How would any organization, any authority will allow them to do that without interference? How could they do something like this? To me, I just don't think it's acceptable. When you look at home appliance, have you experienced, when you talk about your fridge, your washing machines, after 2 years, when you finish the warranty, the product broken? Have you ever experienced with that? I have the washing machine, dishwashing machines, they just broke it a few years after the warranty finished. We can't, when you're at home, when you have issues with the house, you could go to the DIY, you can go to B&Q. But when you have a problem with home appliance, you don't know where to find the support, you don't know where is the manual for to repair it, and where to get the spare parts. As a result, you have to get a professional come to the house to repair your washing machine or your home appliance, and that's cost a fortune. And as a result, you don't know, even after you finish repairing them, you don't know how long it's going to last. So a lot of time, you just retire a perfectly functional machines, and then because it just maybe only a few pounds parts is broken. Majority of them are still functional, but they go to scrapyard just simply because the manufacturer don't want you to do that. Then the next one is instead of to help people disassemble them, manufacturers deliberately make it difficult to be taken apart. So they put in parts, permanently glue them together or weld them together. So when you want to disassemble them, you have to break them, and then they become useless. Not much value. Or do you have experience if you go to the airports, when you repair airports, they have to use the specialized tools to open the cover to be able to repair them. Because they restrict the third party to do the remanufacturing, to repair the products. They deliberately to restrict the instruction is not available, and the spare parts are not available as well. Or they make the software locking. So if you want to do the remanufacture of somebody's mobile phone, then they need the the code from the manufacturer, who won't give it to the third party. They don't want to give it to you. So there are a lot of issues there. Then the financially is also not help, because I'm using the PCP at this moment, because this allow me, get a car with cash up front is very difficult for us. So we're using the PCPs, and they give us really good deal. It's interest free. And the PCPs is like a mortgage, but you have opportunity to return the car back after a few years, and you walk away. The problem is, for me, I like to keep it because I'm doing remanufacturing. I think changing the car every few years is not good for environment. So I want to keep the car, but that's the problems. After a few years, when you want to keep the cars, you have to pay big number of money, and we cannot afford that. Then I have to pay much higher interest rate. So I end up it's cheaper for me to keep a new car rather than keep out to get a new car rather than keep my own car. So the system is not there to encourage people to keep the car. Is that you create a culture, say you have to change the cars every few years. That's no good for circular economy. Then you talk about accounting system. My friend here is accountant. Accounting system here is after a few years, with asset, the university as well, the asset, every year they depreciate, right? For a laptop, I think after 4 or 5 years, it will be zero value on the book, right? What happens if you want to do remanufacturing? You want to restore the function to be as good as new. But on the paper, this still has no value after a few years. But the cost, the money you spend for a remanufacturing is added as cost. So on the book, you have a reduced profit. You even lose money, which is no good for the investor, for the stakeholder. It doesn't really attractive to them. And also, if a company want to upgrade the facilities, especially government encouraging them to upgrade energy efficient system, you can get a tax capital allowance. But when it comes to remanufactured product, it's not sure, I don't know. So the system is not there yet. Now let's talk about the consumer. A lot of people probably haven't heard much about remanufactured. I think everybody knows refurbishment, but not many people knows about the remanufactured product. So they don't realize there is options. You could have as good as new. Everything the same as new, but much cheaper, much environment-friendly options. Again, trust is another issue, because if you talk about refurbishment, they can come as any quality. But any quality is really big alarm for consumer, because this could be anything. And without this certainty, it's become risk for them. And people don't want to buy something they don't know. So that is the trust is there. And they not only talk about consumers, even our stakeholder. When we're talking to people in the remanufacturing sectors, everybody use remanufacturing the same way as refurbishment. They use remanufacturing actually because it's a posh word, rather than it is represented as good as new. So there are a lot of confusion now about, and also about lack of trust. Perception as well. People think remanufacture is not as good as new, and they consider as second-hand, and they don't like it. Another one is confusion. I said not only about the customer, consumers, even people in the sectors, they're really confused about remanufacturing. Another one is the culture-wise. A lot of people in the culture-wise, they just don't like to buy second-hand, they like to buy new one because the social status as well. So there are a lot of food resistance for remanufactured reuse. Now the next one is talk about policy. Legislation is a big barrier for that. So we have extended producer responsibilities. So if you talk about washing machines, talk about the fridges, every product you buy, the producer will pay some money for the end-of-life recycling, right? But the KPI indications look at the recycling, how much recycling they can keep, not on the value retention process. Therefore, people are not encouraged manufacturing. They're not just incentivized to do the remanufacturing. Instead, they want to keep, because the legislation said that you must recycle the materials. They just do bare minimum. They just recycle them. They pay the money to do the recycling, but not money for doing remanufacturing, refurbishment. Again, because if you're talking about the remanufacturing, affecting them selling the new one, they're not interested. Again, if you want to do remanufacturing, manufacture is mass-produced because they can benefit the scale of the economy. If they have a massive scale, they can reduce the cost per unit. They can sell them cheaply. It's the same for remanufacturing. However, if you want to create a scale of economy, you might have to import, get the end of life from abroad. Otherwise, if you only look at the UK, it's too small. So if you want to do that, you have to import. However, the legislations around you stop you from import because end of life is classified as a waste. As soon as you classify as a waste, they have legislation requirement what you can do on this. And make it very difficult for people to get hold of end-of-life product for the remanufacturing. Therefore, they cannot do that because they don't have enough volume, and the cost will be much more expensive. Now you talk about a lot of time, the third-party remanufacturer is the remanufacturer that's not authorized by manufacturer. Manufacturer don't like them. So they threaten because them will say, you breached my copyright, you breached my IPs, and the worst nightmare for a third-party remanufacturer is receive a letter and say, I'm going to sue you. Because it's in the gray area, the legal gray area for them. Now the next one is process and qualities. Because when you collect end-of-life product that arriving in any conditions, sometimes you get good quality one, sometimes they just come is really bad conditions. So you don't know what to do with them until you disassemble them. But we talk about manufacturing is you like to know the condition and can make plans for them. But you cannot do it for remanufacturing because you don't know what happens until you take them apart, look at the inside, then can decide what to do with them. So you cannot create a kind of, plan them in advance. And there are also low volume, large varieties. And also with the remanufacturing, they also don't know what happens before in the use stage, you don't know what happens with the manufacturing. Therefore, they cannot, difficult to make the decisions. So as a result, remanufacturing process, they're really high cost and they're not very efficient. They normally do it by manually, not like a manufacturer. You go to the shiny workshop, you have a robot doing the work all the time. But when you come to remanufacturing, it's just the manual work. People just do it manually, take them apart, manually washing them, the manually, to check it. It's just no productivity at all. Therefore, remanufacturing is not cheap. They're expensive, they're low efficiency, and also they're inconsistency in the quality. When you talk about inconsistency, then there's a risk because people don't trust what kind of quality you can get. Therefore, if you talk about remanufacturing, they're very expensive, and it ends up you have cheaper, bad quality new product, and then good quality remanufactured product. Which one do you choose? A lot of people might just choose the cheaper new product. Then you also talk about a lack of trust, which is limited demand for the remanufactured product. When we talk about manufacture, they're not interested. They're the best person to do it, but they're not interested in remanufacturing. The reason for that is because it's the business model, because they make revenue based on the sale of the product rather than ownership like the service. So if they sell the product, they're not responsible to dispose of the end-of-life product, right? They're not responsible, instead of to make them remanufacturable, they deliberately not designed to be reused, they deliberately make them broken after a few years. They deliberately, they make it harder for people to do that. But if we change the business model from sale-based model to the lease-based model, instead they own the product, they only lease you only use the function. Why do you have to own a product if you could just use the functions? So if you can do that, then manufacturer, they will do everything they can to make the product more durable. Because they own the product, they want people to use it as much as possible. And also they are they can give them, because they own the product, they know what happens, they have the full control, they know how it's being designed, how it is being manufactured, how it's being reused. Then they can decide how it can be remanufactured. They're also giving them predictable flows to improve planning, because I mentioned earlier on, remanufacturing biggest issue is you cannot plan until you take them apart. But if they know what happens in the use, what happens in the production, they can plan it for the reuse. So if you look at the future of remanufacturing, there's so much issues. But what happens to the future? I have been working in this area for more than 10 years. Over the years, I see more and more interest in this area. I think people starting to wake up to the opportunities, not only the consumers, the business, the manufacturer. They're starting to look at, there is a value from the end-of-life product for them. So first one is look at legislation is the major drive for remanufacturing. Have you heard cross-border adjustment mechanism? So that is the EU, going to be EU legislation. So any product to be sold in the EU in the future, they must have the life cycle analysis. They must demonstrate how much emissions. The emission will be converted into money. So if you have energy efficient or low emission product, you can sell the product much cheaper. And that is giving manufacturer motivation starting to do the remanufacture as the product, claim the carbon credit for the product. I think this is a very big motivation. How many of you had right to repair? Raise your hands, you had. That's great. That's great. So right to repair is the legislation in the EU, right? So basically, as we have the experience when you have the Apple laptops, Apple phones, if it's broken, you have to go to the service provider. They designate it. They tell you where to go. But the legislation tells you no. It's your consumer's right to access the spare parts. They must provide the spare parts. It's your right as consumer. It's your right as a consumer to access repair information, basically in the manual, for them to provide you. They need to provide you manual by law. They also need, you can decide who to do the repair for you. You don't have to go to they tell you where to go. You decide where to go because you can choose which one you want to go with. They're also, they're supposed to provide how much life your product can last. So if you design them to fail in 2 years' time, you have to provide the information now. So the consumer can see them and say, okay, you have 50% failure rate after 2 years, then they will decide not to buy the product. So they also, in France, they also have to provide called the repairability score. So based on the availability of the documentation, which is the manual for repair, easy to disassemble, how quickly, how easy you can take them apart, and availability of the spare part, and the price of the spare part, as well as product-specific requirement. You can create a score, and you must stick the score on the machine you sell. So in addition to the energy, it's like you go to the carriers, you see the energy category, right, for the product. Now in France, they also have to stick to repairability score now. And that is for the manufacturers. If they have a score of 2 or 3, they can feel ashamed because the producer consumer is not going to buy them, and they does not look on the social image. So they were under pressure to improve their design, to improve their repairability score. Any of you had iFixit? I saw you few of them. It's great. So iFixit is one of is a website. They provide a lot of free repair information. They take parts apart. They do it step-by-step repair, instructions, and they put all the information on the internet. They also provide the score, repairability score, similar to the one shown in France. So they provide all this information online. And the business model came from is they create a kind of the community for the right to repair, and then they make money from sell the spare parts and sell the special tools for the disassembly. It's a quite useful website. Recently, they started putting the medical device on the website as well. So it might be useful for you guys to have a look. And the biggest nightmare is they constantly receive threatened letters from OEMs saying they have breached the copyright, they have breached the IPs. The next one legislation is digital product passport. Again, by law in the future, manufacturers, stakeholders must provide the information for the end-of-life product, where to get the support. And now everything is just using the QR code. You scan it, you can get all the information now. So now it's by law, you have to do it. And they will they build trust and demonstrate the carbon savings for the product. Now I cannot talk about anything without mentioning AIs and robotics. It's such a buzzword that I receive it. And wherever I go to YouTube, there's so many advertisements about AIs. If you don't talk about AIs, I'm out of date. So for AIs, it is because AIs is revolutionized the manufacturing, and it also can do the same for a remanufacturing. It will allow you can trace back the data. You know what happens at the design, manufacturing, use stage to help you make the right decision when and how to do the remanufacturing. It's also with the robotics, because as I said, the remanufacturing is very individual, very manual, but if robots can use to do all the decisions and then to do the repairs, inspection, all the process, then you could have the same cost, same efficiency as you have seen the manufacturing. That will significantly reduce the cost for remanufacturing. Then you would have a remanufactured product as good as new, but it costs maybe only 20 to 30% of new. So that will be significantly reduce the cost and get people to buy remanufactured product. So talk about what happens. So to me, is to address environment crisis, to enable a transition to the circular economy. It is paramount to make remanufacturing and VRP mainstream in a circular economy, because at this moment, a lot of people still think recycling is the way for remanufacturing. I think we need to think of alternative way and understand different options before we go to talk about recycling. There are many challenges around the remanufacturing. As I said, the system is not built for remanufacturing. However, the future is really bright, because you can see the legislation is gradually in place for the remanufacturing, and the policy is in place as stakeholders, policymakers, they have growing interest in these areas. And also people, consumers also become more and more environment conscious. They demand the product. They want them to be more environment friendly, as well as the technology. Technology, with the wide adoption of the technology, they become cheaper and more affordable. That's all good factors to make remanufacturing become the major mainstream for a circular economy. However, I think we're not there yet for the remanufacturing to be a mainstream, because I think it's perceptions, the legislations, the issues around that. This is why I'm here, because I want to make myself loud. I want to make it, something people can understand. This can add value. We need to make our voice loud as well to the stakeholders, to the policymakers. We need good policy to be in place. We need to do it properly to address our environmental crisis. Let's talk about, for example, you have a remanufactured product. They already paid this tax in the first place, but they have to pay tax again when they sell them again in the market. Why? Could we lobby to the government and say, maybe you can waive the tax for a second when you sell on the market? That will encourage more people to do that. We need to just have a coordinated voice. We need a community. We need lobby for that. And that it has to be cross-sector. We cannot only talk about one sector because the voice is too fragmented. We need everybody working together to address this issue. And thank you very much. I'm setting the regional manufacturing, no, not me, University Brighton is setting up the regional catalyst to create a community for remanufacturing. I do hope you all can just join us in this mission. Before I go, I want to say thank you very much. First is over the last 10 years, I have received a lot of internal funding to allow me to concentrate on research, build the network. I'm very grateful for that. I also want to thank, for example, EPSRC Innovate UK for the funding support, and BSI for the support, as my colleagues, friends, for your support as well. So thank you very much.